Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we are doing an exciting video. We are doing DIY home decor today, but we are doing inspiration pieces. So we are doing DIY dupes of McGee Co home decor. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first up is a wicker handled glass jug. Now you can find similar styles to this jug at the thrift store. I'm using this lamp though in order to recreate this. So the first thing I had to do was deconstruct this lamp. I started off by taking the bulb out and then I emptied out the contents. And I put this all in a sandwich bag just in the off chance that I wanted to put it back together. After that I moved on to cleaning it up. So I just used simple glass cleaner to wipe the exterior and then I rinsed out the inside to make sure that no sand residue was still there. Now for the wicker handle, I'm using part of this cane from this old chair that I needed to replace anyways. And I tried my best to keep the long pieces intact. So then I took those cut pieces, dropped them in a bin, and soaked them in water. I soaked them for about 30 minutes, but you definitely can get away with less time. You also want to make sure that when you're actually trying to apply these, that you actually dry them off completely before you try gluing them down. So you don't want them soaking wet because they won't stick on the jar if you glue them down. But you don't want them completely dry either because then they'll break. So as you can see here, I'm just gluing down and I'm using hot glue for this part. So I'm putting hot glue on the glass, then wrapping the cane around the bead of glue, and then holding it in place until it dries. Honestly though, that's basically it. This was one of the easier projects and I was so happy to actually try this. And it's very simple too. Thing that you wanted to recreate and you don't have cane webbing, what I suggest is using either raffia. Raffia ribbon would be an easy go-to. And if you really want to go for the look, is to buy binder cane that you use on chairs. And you can find this easily on Amazon. Next up are these bamboo stitched coasters. For this project, I'm using these mini coasters that I found at Dollar Tree to recreate the look. So I just started off by carefully popping off each of these wooden pieces, and these came off relatively easy in no time at all. I just simply used a flathead screwdriver to help me pry them off. Next, I moved on to drilling holes for the end pieces. So using the wider pieces of wood, I just drew 2 dots on each end of the piece of the wood so I can drill my holes, which is where the cane will thread through. This was important to get it as close as possible to the actual inspiration piece and to make it look like it was actually weaved. So using my wet cane once again, I'll be using these to thread the pieces together. So as you can see here, I'm just threading up through the back, going over, and then threading through from the top through the back again. Next, I'm just overlapping the pieces to create an X, and then I'm going to be gluing down my first wooden piece. You'll also want to glue down where the cane intersects just to make sure it doesn't move around on you. Now for this next part, you're going to be taking the cane pieces and then making an X on the top of the wood. So you want to make sure that you cross them over, making sure that they're even as possible, and then threading them through on the bottom once again. This is essentially how to make the quote-unquote stitched look. And you want to make sure that you also glue it on the back side as well, just to make sure that there's no movement. But basically you just want to repeat this process until you get to the last wooden piece. So for this project, unfortunately my cane pieces that I cut weren't long enough, so I ended up having to glue the last piece down first and then using more cane to loop it through those holes that I created for those end pieces. So again, I'm just using my hot glue gun to glue everything down. And then using smaller cane pieces, I am just threading those through those holes and then cutting off the excess and gluing them down too. And honestly, this was the most complex project, and this being the most complex step of the project, so if you can get through this, you're golden. And once you're finished with this step, it's on to staining. So for the staining, I just ended up using the natural stain color to kind of get more of that bamboo colored look that I was going for. And I knew I wasn't going to get a perfect circle because of the fact that these wood pieces were so small that I couldn't actually make a coaster the size that I wanted it to be. But I ended up using this Dremel to kind of round out the edges on the top pieces and the bottom pieces. And quite honestly, just because of the way they turned out, this ended up being one of my favorite projects. final project is the aged terracotta jar. So we've had this vase since the beginning of time, since I moved into this house, and I wanted to see if I could recreate this look. So I started off by cleaning it, of course, making sure that it was pristine before I actually gave it a good spray paint. So I ended up using black matte spray paint in order to cover this completely. I figured matte was the best way to go just because of the fact that aged pottery doesn't seem to have a shininess to it usually. But I also coated it on the outside as well as the inside just to make sure that it had a more cohesive look. Once I was done with that, it was on to my mud mixture. So I started off with a really watery mud mixture base for my first coat. And then once I was done with that and had it dry, I wiped it off, as you'll see in the next clip, and then basically applied my second coat of mud. Now my second coat of mud was actually much thicker, and honestly if I sprayed it a little bit more with spray paint and then put this mud mixture on, I think more of it would have adhered to it than it actually did, but that was okay because my next step is actually what really kind of covers the vase completely. So I covered it completely, waited for it to dry, and then I was going to move on to my next step, which was using baby powder. Now, I'll be totally honest, I've never seen anyone use baby powder, and there's a good chance that someone has. But when I was thinking of things to give it that white aged look, I definitely didn't want to use flour just because of the fact I think of like food stuff and just think of ants crawling all over it. So I decided to go with powder. So I ended up using water and baby powder to kind of create this paste mixture, and I dabbed that on, and then I used dry baby powder to kind of coat that over. Now, out of all of the projects, I would say that this is more of an inspiration piece than it is actually a dupe. And I say this because I only looked at the picture once, and I didn't use it as a visual guide to keep my progression similar to that. Also, I went all in on this baby powder technique. I just really loved the texture that was coming out of it, so I just kept on adding more and more and more. So I'm definitely glad that this aged jar was the inspiration because I wouldn't have made this piece otherwise. Alright guys, that is it for the content today, but thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if dupes are something that you want to see again, definitely make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Also, if you're not subscribed, if I pass that vibe check for you, definitely make sure you're subscribed and you hit that little notification bell so you're in the know when I post again. But I want to say thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys!